Hi, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. Today is part two of the books that I did not finish in 2025. And then I think next video is going to be my favorite books of 2025, which I am very, very excited about. So let's get cracking on the books that I could not finish. So the first one was The Magician's Nephew by C.S. Lewis. This one, I think, is technically supposed to be the first book in this entire series. And my original intention with this series was to just finish off the whole series because I really like fantasy, although I'm not sure if that's really true anymore, at least in 2025, but that's another story for another day. I originally meant to finish this entire series, but I think I'm just not interested anymore. I started reading this, I got maybe 20% of the way through. This does follow a totally different set of characters. So it follows our main characters, Polly and Diggory. They are basically tricked by Diggory's uncle into getting this ring, which is basically a portal into another world. And they end up in Narnia, and it's about their adventures there. And I'm not really interested in the themes anymore. This world is not really fascinating to me anymore. And I think that's basically just it. I'm just not interested anymore. So I'm probably not going to go back to this series, although I will remember The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe with fond memories. And I am very, very excited for the Greta Gerwig adaptation coming up sometime soon, I think. The second book that I could not finish was Orbital by Samantha Harvey. This one follows six people who they're on this ship traveling through space. For what reason, I'm not entirely sure. I don't entirely remember. But we kind of follow snippets and vignettes of their life, and Harvey kind of touches on the environment and all that. I can tell Samantha Harvey is really into space, right? The issue that I have is that this book is basically just shower thoughts. This book could have been a blog post because she talks a lot about her kind of musings on humanity, time, space, but it was so disjointed because there was no sense of really plot. It was very slice of life. And without that connection of an overall plot line, it was basically just her thoughts on life. And to be honest, I didn't really find them to be very profound. So this was just a no from me. The third book I did not finish was Catabasis by R.F. Kuang. This one saddened me because R.F. Kuang is actually an author that I've read pretty much all of her books on. Some are definitely more successful than others. I think sadly, her first trilogy, The Poppy War, was the most successful in my opinion. I think it had the best well developed characters, a well developed plot, a great world, and a lot of time and care exploring themes of colonialism and immigration, identity. It was just her best overall work. And I don't think anything she has written afterwards has come close to my love for the Poppy War trilogy, which is honestly very, very sad. Maybe she just needs to go back to writing fantasy, maybe. I think all of her books afterwards had a lot of good ideas that were superficially explored. Like, for example, Babel, right? Another book about colonialism and academia, but again, didn't come close to the type of real character work and real theme exploration as the Poppy War trilogy did. I think the same with Yellowface. I think that book got a lot more flack than I think it deserved. I think it was a bit more nuanced than maybe it was perceived to have. But again, that one definitely wasn't her best in my opinion either. And I think Catabasis is definitely her worst work so far, unfortunately. I will still continue to read anything that she puts out, but I just could not get through this book. I honestly would have rather read a book from her about her ideas about hell and her commentary about the works of literature that explored this topic, but it seemed like the characters in this book were secondary, and the plot and the romance were all secondary to her ideas of this book, basically. And that just does not interest me. And there are far greater books out there who have a better, deeper exploration of this topic, and honestly, better characterization and all of that. So I think the thing with this book is that the ideas took over everything. And there are definitely books that can do this well, right? The first author that comes to mind is George Orwell, right? I mean, Animal Farm is basically an allegory, a fable about animals, right, who live on a farm, and it's about um, what it means, socialism, tyranny, all these ideas, right? And there's not really character development in it. These animals or characters, I guess, serve as a vessel for George Orwell's ideas and what he wants to say through this book, right? So I can appreciate books that do that, but I think R.F. Kuang is trying to have good characters. I think she is capable of writing a good plot line, right? So it's just disappointing when she can't do it and the ideas just don't stand on their own. So I'm very sad about that one, but again, I am going to be reading more of her books. So, next book that I didn't finish was The Sparrow by Mary Duria Russell. This one is a science fiction novel about a priest who goes to a planet that had just been discovered called Rakhat, and he is part of the Society of Jesus. And his mission is to spread the good word, and he comes back from this world very damaged, but no one knows why. And so the book starts off like that, and then the whole story is basically leading up to this point where he's at. So it kind of goes into his relationships and how this world came to be and all of that. And I thought that concept was so interesting, and it just didn't deliver. I think I think that world building was just extremely boring. I think the characters were boring. Everything was just kind of boring. And I could not stomach enough of the story to move on and see the payoff. And when I was reading Goodreads reviews, apparently the payoff is not really worth it anyways. So I just kind of stopped this book, which is really sad because I really wanted to like it. But alas, that is life, right? The next book is a totally different, the opposite side of the spectrum. We have the Wolf King by Laura Palfreyman. This one is a romantasy about a princess who gets kidnapped by the Wolf King. No, I think he's a prince at the beginning of the book. The Wolf Prince of an opposing kingdom. And why I wanted to read this book was because I heard that there was a love triangle that's similar to the ACOTAR series love triangle. I was just in the mood for a juicy love triangle. And say what you want about Sarah J. Maas, but that love triangle, I guess, really was something a little creative in the romantasy sphere. I think that type of genre work has not really been done in recent memory, in the at least in the modern romanticities that I've read. So say what you will about Sarah J. Maas, but it's it's there, right? I just wanted something dramatic and juicy, and honestly, I just could not get past the what potty what patty writing of this book. It was just very cringy, and the characters were nothing really to write home about. They really felt like high schoolers. I just Again, I think with romantasy, a lot of times the concept and the summary sound a lot better than the actual execution, unfortunately. So unfortunately, I had to DNF this one. I couldn't even get to the love triangle aspect of it, which was why I read it in the first place, but I think I'm good on that. So that's that one. And then I read Red City by Marie Lu. Marie Lu. I had taken a break from her, and I wanted to come back to her and see if any of her adult work was something I would be interested in. I don't think so. I think that I just need to take a forever break from Marie Lu. I really appreciated it, her Legend series. I really liked that series when I was in high school, but I think honestly everything else after that I just cannot get into. Sad, but maybe her writing is just not for me anymore. I think her writing is definitely suited for high school me, but definitely not adult me. And in this book is about rivals rivals to lovers, essentially. It is an urban fantasy with alchemy, and it explores a lot of topics that I read thus far about immigration and identity and living as kind of an other in a society. I was expecting a lot more drama. I was expecting a lot more action. I What I got instead, I think, was kind of lukewarm character development, and some of these lines are just so cringy. There was a line, I'll have to insert it, but it was about morning and night, and it was cringy. It was at that point when I decided to kind of give up on the book, because I just think it was just cringy, and I just don't think that the world building was really that interesting, to be honest. It really felt less like a fantasy world than just a contemporary setting, with mild hints of magic, in my opinion. And that could be me too. That could be me too. Maybe I didn't read far enough into the book to really see all that magic build up, but it was boring. I couldn't get through enough of it to even see it. And the last book that I have is The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. This is a nonfiction book, actually, that explores the way that social media has affected our younger generation, specifically, probably the Gen Z generation, and how it's created a generation of anxious kids. I I definitely think that this is a topic worth exploring for sure. And while I don't disagree with his overall message, that social media leads to a lot of comparison between people, and that creates an unhealthy dynamic between our, parasocial relationships, I do think that he uses data very hazardly. What I mean by that is that he will use a lot of pop science data. I think Jonathan Haidt uses data that is already not very good, in my opinion, and meaning that there's not like a full trial associated with it, with like statistical analysis and all of that, to see if there's biases in the data and things like that. He just kind of uses whatever data is out there and kind of tries to force it into a box to further confirm his bias, I think. And I think a lot of the data and things that I read, I was very unconvinced that of his argument, essentially. He uses a lot of data that I thought, well, it could be, there are many possible reasons for why this data could be the way it is, right? Remember, causation does not equal correlation, right? And just because something is trending one way in the data does not mean that that's the reason, right? So, for example, I can't even remember what data he used because I just didn't like the way he used data at all. But, for example, we use the classic example of sharks and ice cream, right? Uh, More people buy ice cream, and that is correlated with more shark attacks, right? Does that mean that sharks come out when there's more ice cream? No, right? It just means that most likely the explanation is that, in the summertime, more people go to the beach, they go get ice cream, right? So there's more people in the ocean, more shark attacks is most likely what happened. But that doesn't correlate with anything with the amount of ice creams that were bought, if that makes any sense. But he was doing a lot of that in this book. And I also thought that he was using a lot of the data to kind of further kind of discriminatory opinions. I also thought a lot of this information was really repetitive. And again, this could have been an opinion piece. It could have been a long blog post somewhere. And I think honestly that I would have gotten more out of it. But as it stands, it's a whole ass book with a lot of nothing, in my opinion. I'd be interested in maybe if there's other books that have more robust data and commentary with it. But again, I think this book is at at best not a great book. At worst, kind of damaging book because it's giving people a way to look at information that is not supported by scientific evidence. So, those are the rest of the books that I did not finish in 2025. 2026 is now a clean slate. I am sure there's more books that I will not finish by 2026, but I think that's the beauty of books, right? You cannot finish them if it's not something that you're interested in. And I think that I have a better idea of kind of what to avoid in these types of books and in reading reviews, especially when it comes to romantasy. Definitely some that I would have needed to read to kind of find out my opinions about it. And that's okay. I think I think it's worth it to try things out of your comfort zone. Thank you so much for joining today. Let me know again other books that you did not finish today, and I will see you in my next video for my favorite books of 2025. Thank you so much. Bye bye.